Okay, welcome everybody to race coverage of the March Monument series. This is the first race, number 1 of 3. There will be further races the next 2 weekends, and this is the final 98 kilometers of the Milan-San Remo route that the pros ride. The ride is presented by OTR e-racing on RGT, and it's sponsored by Torm Cycle Clothing. They're going to be offering spot prizes for the most combative. Okay, welcome everybody to race coverage of the March Monument series. This is the first race. And I'm listening to myself. Okay, let's turn that off. So, the race gets underway in 7.5 minutes, and we've got, I think, 43 riders signed up. So expect to see more arriving on the virtual line very shortly. Now, I covered the sportive yesterday evening, and that was quite exciting. But I expect the race to be a completely different tactic. And there's you can see there's sufficient places where breaks can happen. I tend to think that the race will probably stay together in the early part of the race, the first half, and then the action will really start when we start to hit the hills. And we've got one particularly steep one, as you can see, at just about the 2/3 distance, and then we've got the big climb, and then the smaller one to finish. So plenty of opportunities for people to break free. Now, it should be explained, and I'm doing this each time, but I have to join the race, but I'm not actually going to be riding it. I've set alarms on my phone. Hopefully this time they will operate. And what the alarms will do is remind me to climb on the bike every 30 minutes so that I don't get thrown out of the race. So I'll be covering it from the back using spectate mode. And what I'll do is I will obviously follow what's happening at the head of the race, but I will also give shout outs to the people further back and groups. So everybody will get a fair share of the coverage. I'm quite looking forward to this one, but just looking at Neo's comments there in the chat, I'm hoping the rest of the people turn up, because as he says, there are a lot of people missing at the moment. We had 43 signed up in the app, so I'll just message. And you can see that James is in the chat. James Ogilvie, he's the organizer of this event. I'm looking out for Paul from torm.cc. He should be joining us for the race, I believe. He was down in the leaderly. Brooke Wavel, he rode part of the course last night and was the strongest rider up until the time that he packed in. So I'm expecting a good ride from him today, providing his legs have recovered. His name's Peter, so it's Peter Brook Waddle. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I can't recognise any other names from last night. I don't see anybody else yet in the... But it was particularly brutal last night towards the end of the race. It wasn't very steep, but the riders had done 95 kilometres and some of them were still pushing out race style wattages towards the end. So it was a pretty impressive ride from those that took part in the sportive. Now we're expecting OTR, who are the premier team in this event, to lead the charge and their tactics to influence the race. But the big question is going to be, are they going to be strong enough to hold off other riders? Are they going to be able to use their team tactics? As I say, it should be an exciting race, but I really would have loved to have seen all 43 riders on the start line, and we're getting very close to the start now, and there's a lot of riders missing. And I just, for the life of me, don't understand that. Why sign up to an event and then not even come along to the start line? That just doesn't make sense. But it's a new venture, and I'm pretty sure that once we get a bit of coverage out there and we see what's happening with the race format, and I'm hoping my coverage helps in that endeavour, then hopefully we'll see more people taking part in these events. So best of luck, everybody. I'll do my best to cover it. There's plenty of primal riders there, isn't there? Yeah. And we'll see what transpires. I got my drinks handy. So when everybody shoots off the line, coverage will be suspended for a few seconds while I jump on my bike and turn the pedals, because I have to, in fact, I'm going to jump on now just to see whether my, let's get this sorted, just to see whether my power is actually going to be picked up and showing. I did have issues yesterday with this, so let's give it a try and see whether. Why is it that there's always something with why is my power not showing? It's showing disconnected. That's why it's connecting now. Hopefully. Right, let's get going. There we go. Okay. And we're off. Okay, I can now get to the back to the race. So okay, so this is the start of the race, and you can see, let's just get a decent side-on view so that we can watch the action. It's a fast start, but I expected that. Let's zoom out a little bit so that we can see riders on the road. And there we go. So already we have, let's check what's happening behind them by swinging the camera around. So if we look at this group moving forward and then try and get through the trees and look what's happening behind them. Nope, not from that view we can't. What about this way? Yeah, we can just about see behind them. You can see that this group has really shot away. So how many have we got? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we've got about 10, 11 riders who have broken free, and they're going to be forming the front group. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go back down the and have a look and see. I have to flick through. Here we go. And these are the chasing riders. Now, Doug was riding last night. He checked out last night's course, so hopefully he's got his legs back. This is not a fantastic view with the trees, so let's try and improve on it. There we go. There's me at the. So I'm the last rider on the road. So this is the last 4 riders on the road, and what I'm going to do now is work my way back forwards. So Doug's in no man's land at the moment between groups, and then you've got Sakini just in front of Doug, and then this is the leading group. I'm currently watching Neil, but you can see that there's Turcott in there, there's Ellis, there's Simmons, Johnson. I'd expect, I can't pronounce his name, but Jobczynski. Hope I've made a good job of that. And I suspect that Wavell's in there as well somewhere. I'd be very surprised if he's not, if he's racing. So let's work his way through this group and see if we can find. Oh, Chang's in there as well. There we go. There's Peter Buckwavell. So I'm expecting him to be one of the stronger riders today. He certainly was in the Sportive last night, so he'll be one to watch. We got Bellio in as well. Antala, he's leading them out at the moment. Now the Sportive ran at about 3 watt kilos, with people obviously pushing higher than that at times on the flat sections. So you can see already that the race pace is slightly above, well, not slightly, but a good deal above what the Sportive was run at. And you'd expect that. You wouldn't expect the race to be run at the same pace as the Sportives. Okay, so we'll work his way back down the field and have a look and see what's happening behind. There's plenty of time with this race. I'm thinking it's going to take a couple of hours, 2 hours plus. So there's going to be lots of time for coverage to watch the action and see what's happening. And we can zoom in and out of the riders to get a good feel for, who's putting in the work. And what I've got to try and decide today is who's the combative riders. And the only way to do that is to constantly switch between the different groups, like these on the road, and then there's me at the back. Look, so these are the last 4 on the road. Now, the spectate view only allows me to flick through riders one at a time. So I can follow the riders on the road, but in order to get all the way through a group, I have to flick through one at a time per the rider. So that's why you're seeing, even though I'm changing the view, it's staying with the group, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I count 10 riders in this group. And it looks like the majority of them are doing their fair share of work. One of the things that was very, very evident last night in the Sportive was the way that Peter Wavell in particular was riding smart. He was saving his energy. He never got into difficulty. He was never hanging off the back. He was never having to close gaps and burn matches. He rode very, very smartly. And I think you can see that he's got good racecraft, because he's doing the same here. He's moving around the group nice and smoothly. He's not hanging off the back at any time. And yet he's not being sort of like called to the front all the time to do the work. So expect to see him go into the front and do his fair share. But he's a pretty clued up. In fact, he's at the front now, but he's a pretty clued up rider, and that's good to see. And here you've got the group that was behind. So they've joined Doug, the riders behind, and they're currently 350 meters behind the front group. Now, sometimes I can actually switch the view like this, and you can actually see them catching the group in front, but they're too far behind at the moment, and in fact the gap's opening. But that's not going to be the end of the story, because I honestly think that this course is going to be about what happens on the climbs, and even the shorter climb, of which we've got one coming up shortly, will be a chance for the stronger riders to close the gaps and the weaker riders to drop back slightly. But when they're riding in a group like this and working together, gaps can quickly be closed if all the riders in the group are prepared to put in the work. So currently we've got two groups on the road, which is nice. That gives for good race coverage. So here's the front group again. Now there's only 18 riders online, so you've got these. Is it still 10 at the front? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, it's 12. It's now expanded to 12. So you've had a couple of people join this front group. Let's work our way back. And then you've got Doug and Millard Doug and Nagy have opened up a little bit of a gap on the small group behind, but they should have them in sight. Let's have a look. Yeah, there we go. Look. Now this doesn't make sense. If you're racing, you know, and splitting into a group of 5 is going to close the gap a lot quicker than a group of 2 and a group of 3. So to me, this just doesn't make sense. By the way, do you like the rain in the new skin, the new software? It's pretty cool. It's the first time we've seen it in RGT. So not only do you get the broken tarmac on the roads and the cobbles later on in the ride, but you get the rain and clouds and lack of sunshine, just like real life. So as I say, I'm a little bit surprised that these two have split off the main group, but they are working significantly harder, and perhaps that's why, because the group behind just weren't prepared to. I mean, these two are working pretty hard here. And then you've got the front group. These guys are on the first short climb. You can see the slope is 2.2 here with Jabinski, and they're putting out significant effort. You know, you can see the numbers going red here, so they're putting out a fair amount of effort here. But I don't expect this to, we'll work his way forward, but I don't expect this to really split up the group. You can see that these gaps are appearing, but a climb of that length isn't going to split them up that much. I expect this lot to come all back together. That would be my guess here. They'll quickly close the gap on the riders in front. In fact, let's try and switch the view around so that we can actually watch. Oops, there we go. So Chang's in the middle of the two groups. Let's just swing around, and you can see he's just hanging off the front 5 riders, but then the others are busy chasing Chang. So it will come back together. This is not going to stay apart, judging by the numbers being put out by the chasing group. And they can work so much better. You can already see them closing the gap on Chang. They're working so much better as a group. There's only just the one rider hanging off the back. Let's go and find out who he is. Yeah, Jobczynski, I think that's the way to pronounce it. But again, I expect Jobczynski will close this gap. He's not that far behind. He can see them on the road, so once if he keeps the effort going, he will close the gap. And you've got Neil in there, Neil Pugh's in there in this small fight, and there they go. They've caught Chang already. Now, if Chang hangs off the back, which it doesn't look like he's going to do, so yeah, Chang has just waited for them and he's now riding with them. So Jobczynski may well struggle to close this gap now. I was expecting them to catch Chang and then possibly Jobczynski to close the gap, but and you've got another rider in the middle as well. Nagy's now dropped off. Yeah, it's splitting up all over the road. So these are the last riders on the road, these three, because there I am right at the back. Keep an eye on the time and make sure I jump on the bike in time, but my alarm should go off. And they'll catch Doug. Three riders should be able to catch him, even though he's of course Nagy's putting out significantly more wattage as well. So he's not going to catch Jobczynski in his time soon. And these six riders, I think, will catch the main group. Let's swing around and see how far they are away from. Can they see? Oh, I don't know. It's 140 meters behind. So we could have seen. We've still got the climbs to go, but we could have seen a race winning split here, because you can see James is the last man. Let's move forward so you can see what I'm saying. But James, sorry, that's backwards. Move forwards. So you've got James there, leading out the front group. He's doing a sterling ride and pushing the pace on at 5 watt kilos, and that's why they're opening up such a gap on Neil's team further behind. So you've got these 5 riders out front. James won't keep this gap, that's for sure. My guess is he's just testing people's legs, and they'll bring him back. So we got James out front. We've got these 4, and then who's behind? Let's have a look. That's it. So these five on the road are basically, I think, even at this early point, the contenders for the win. I mean, everything can change with the climbs, but if they get a big enough gap by the time they hit the first decent climb, and a big enough gap's probably around 500 meters, it's very unlikely that a gap of that size will be closed once we hit the hills. So 500 meters, shall we say, and these guys will be golden. They'll be fighting out amongst themselves. And just look at the old OTR boys. You've got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you've got 3 OTR boys in the lead group here, and that's on the road. So you'd have to think they've got a definite advantage here if they manage to keep this going and stay as a team. So let's see what's happening further down the road. This is Neo's team. So you've got a further OTR rider. In fact, two more. You've got Simmons and Neil riding for OTR. So basically, you've got 5 in the front group, you've got 5 in the second group, and then let's see what's happening. Or is it 6 in now? 5, yeah. And then you've got poor old Jabzinski in no man's land. He's between groups. He's 500 metres off Neo's group, and he's a further 170 odd metres in front of the next rider on the road, which is Nagy. Now they'd do well to join together, but I can understand if Jobczynski doesn't ease up to allow Nagy to close, because 170 metres and it's growing, so it looks like they're not riding at similar pace. And then, as I suspected, this group would catch Doug, which they've now done, and it's beneficial for this group to stay together as a group of 4. So we've got 2 groups of 5 at the front end, and then we've got a group of 4 at the back and a couple of sole riders in the middle. So you'd expect these riders to stay riding as a group. Whoops. Now they may well catch Nagy, but he is doing on average more watt kilos than the 4 men chasing him. So he may well keep his gap for a little while. Although I can see Jobczynski and Nagy coming back together. And then second group on the road. This is Neo's group. And they're now 6 riders. How did they become 6 riders? Okay. And then you've got James and his group of 5 up the front. And they're working well together. Look at them taking turns, and like I say, you can see with Peter Brookwarrell doing his pull on the front, but he's certainly going to be one of my picks for this race, but we'll call it once we've got a couple of the hills out of the way. I'm not going to call it this early because a lot can happen. And Peter didn't ride the full route last night, so he will have saved himself. I think he was just stretching his legs, but he was looking so strong and so smart in the way that he rode the event. There was some very good riding last night, in particular from people further back in the field, and there's some good teamwork, some good tactics used. And it wasn't a race last night, it was a sportive, but let's be honest, they did treat it as a race. So, and here you can see the short risers are going to test the riders. You know, we're going to get an idea as to who are the strong ones and who are the ones struggling to close the gaps. But I don't think we're going to see much change until we hit the halfway point and the first of the steeper climbs. And then you can see from the profile on the bottom of the screen, at about 2/3, you've got that steep red section. I expect that will be one of the determining factors in this race. That's where, certainly if I was riding it and I had the strength, that's where I'd want to make the break as a climber. What would be interesting is to speak to some of the riders later and ask if any of them actually checked out the course profiles and knew what was coming up and knew what to expect prior to the race, or whether they just came into it blind. That would make an interesting conversation, I think. And this is Neil Pugh's team with the 6 riders. Can't quite work out where the 6th rider came from, because this was 5. But oh, was it Chang? Yeah, it was. I think it was Chang, wasn't it? That was in no man's land, and so Chang has closed the gap. I wish I'd caught that on camera, because that would have been interesting. I mean, what I'm looking for in these races is riders that are putting in efforts above and beyond, either to close gaps, to help their teammates, or to just ride smart. And these are the riders that will potentially be in the running for the spot prizes, which torm.cc, Torm Cycle Clothing, are going to offer. So they're sponsoring the event, and they're going to offer spot prizes to riders who are deemed to be either the most combative, the best team efficient rider in terms of helping his teammates. Or, I mean, we had one rider last night who was really, really strong. His name escapes me now, but you can go back and watch the footage. And there was 2. I think they were both from Sweden, and there was 2 riders riding together, and one of them was way stronger than his teammate, yet dropped back to pick him up, to take him back to the group, and stayed with him. And that was pretty special to see, because that shows real, real teamwork, real caring for your compatriots. And that's what we're looking for. That's what we want to see. We want to see good teamwork, people working together. But we also want to see strong performances. And I'm going to be looking for that later in the video, when we start to get to the meat and bones of the ride. But it's not me that makes the decision. I can only put forward my ideas, like I'm doing here online, and then it'll be up to to Paul from Torm's Cycle Clothing, and he'll make the final decision who deserves the spot prizes, probably in conjunction with me and with James, but he will have the final say who the prizes go to. But hopefully, and there's my first alarm, you can hear going off. So I'm now going to jump on my trainer. I'm going to flick to me, and what I'm doing here is I have to remain part of the ride. So I'm just waiting till my cadence shows up. You can see my power's over there, it's in my cadence. So that's enough for me to not get kicked out of the ride. I can now go back to the front of the race, and it looks like Turcotte has got a 17-meter gap. So let's have a look and see what's happening behind him. No, he's not gonna keep that, is he? So the 4 riders behind are going to close up on him, and although he's working pretty hard here, 4.5 kilo, and the group behind are in the freeze. The really smart riders are the ones that are, drafting and saving the effort. So expect them to, he's managing to maintain the gap at 25 meters at the moment, but I don't expect this to, this is not going to come to a break. They're not going to let him go. So they'll just keep him in sight. And oh, and look at James putting out 10 watt kilos. So he's that's good team tactics. Well done, James. And yes, I was just about to say, James really should go on past if he's capable of putting out that kind of power. And what these guys should do, these 3 OTR riders should be doing this. They should be sort of like taking it in turns, pushing off the front. Let's check up on. There's James, look, having a dig at the front. I think he knows he's not going to go anywhere yet. The time to do this, I think, is a bit later in the race. I think, but they're obviously just seeing who are the strong riders. I mean, they've got Brooke Wavel looks to be in difficulty, which kind of surprises me a little. He's putting out 7 watt kilos just to close the gap at the moment, and he's done so. But the problem, I tried to explain this in last night's Sportive. The problem with that is that if you burn too many matches too early in the race, when you really need to put in an effort like that, it's going to be, exponentially more difficult. And eventually you're going to end up getting dropped. So he needs to stay in contact with these riders and not allow himself to fall off the back. So let's switch the camera around and watch them catching. James has opened up a 39 meter gap, so he's not going to maintain that. These 4 are going to bring him back. But look at the sensible riding from his teammates, Johnson and who's the other one? Who's the other OTR? Simmons. They're not pulling on the front, which is, that's the correct thing to do. Don't go to the front. Don't do any pulling. You don't want to be pulling your teammate back. You want to let the other guys do all the work, tire them out. I mean, by all means, keep the pace up, but don't take turns on the front. This is good riding by OTR. This is really good riding, clever. But my personal feeling is it's a little bit too early for this kind of cat and mouse. I mean, James is sitting up now. He's allowing them to come back to him. But it's good. It's a good exercise to test the other riders. See if they are strong or whether they're just going to say, well, okay, you guys can have it. I mean, if OTR don't win this race today, then there's something seriously wrong because the outmanning. They've got 3 riders in this front group. They've got Neil leading out the second group on the road. I mean, I don't know what to make of Brooke Wavel. He dropped off the back earlier, but was that just him taking a breather? And here we go again. Look, they're taking it in turns. That's Turcotte on the front. So OTR are taking it in turns to work this Antala over, and they're doing a good job of it. But let's check on. We can come back to these folks because I don't expect these 5 really to. I mean, yeah, you get them stretching it like this, but I don't expect them to start splitting the group until we get to the hills. So let's check out. This worries me. Peter Brooke Wavel has now been dropped for the second time, And every time this happens and he tries to close the gap, he's burning matches. And that's a term we use in racing, burning matches. You've only got, it's like a box. There's only so many matches in your box, and eventually you're going to run out. And looking at the what kilos he's putting out, it doesn't look like he's going to close his gap anytime soon. So maybe he'll wait. He'll sit up and pick up the group behind, which we're now moving to. So this is Neo's group. Again, with a further 2 OTR members in it. So they definitely have the advantage in this second group on the road. You would expect them to, later in the race, to start working over the other riders, using team tactics the same as you're seeing up the front. And then you've got these two that I said would join together. So this is clever riding by both these two riders, Nagy and Jobzinski, to come together and ride together. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to be apart on the road. And then this group again, Doug was out the front because he was working harder, but it does look like the other riders are allowing Doug to do a lot of the work, although having said that, now they're coming to the front. But he's got to be careful that he doesn't do more than the lion's share, because the other riders will just take advantage of him later on in the race. And Ellis is last man on the road, so he's obviously been dropped by the group in front. And he's 830 meters behind, so he's going to have a tough race. Let's hope he gets to the finish, but he's got a tough race ahead of him. He's got another 80 kilometers to ride, and he could well end up doing that on his own. So you would expect these 4 riders to stay together. I would certainly try and stay with the other riders if I was riding with these folks. Well, Flag is making a break off the front. But you would expect these 4 to stay together. It doesn't make sense to not do so. And then these two look very comfortable riding together. They're not going to close the gap on the second group on the road, Neil and Simmons's group, but I don't think so anyway. I think they're too far back now. They're 1.3, 1.4 kilometers behind, so I can't see them closing that kind of gap. And here we are, the 5 riders in group 2 on the road, and they're working well together. We're not seeing any real sort of like switching about in this group, because I think for the second group on the road, it's a complete different dynamic to what it is with the group up front. The 2 OTR boys in this group have no need to, have a show of strength at this point. It's way too early. And they're only fighting for the minor places now, and they know that. They're not going to come back to the group in front. I do think that Brooke Wavel will join these 5 riders. I think he'll end up easing up slightly and then join this group and be a strong rider in this group. I don't know, I could have got it wrong, but that's my feeling. So let's move forward and check out. There he is. So he's now 260, 270 meters off the front group. and unless he shows incredible strength on the climbs, he's not going to close that gap. I mean, 500 is the kind of distance I would say the riders aren't going to close on each other. But at the moment, it's 320 and growing. So I don't know. I tend to think he's easing up and waiting for the group behind him. But he's got a fair bit of a way because they're 900 meters behind him, and he's doing significantly more wattage than they are. It's a difficult call. I mean, what would you do? Leave comments if you want to, but what would you do in this situation? You're 300 meters off the front, you're 930 meters off the group behind you. Would you continue pushing it out on your own and maintaining your 5th place? Or would you ease up and wait for the group behind so that you can draft and save a bit of energy and then possibly have a good run into the finish? It's a difficult call. I've ridden many of these kind of events solo, just been out in no man's land, like this fellow here, and managed to maintain that no man's land. But it's a lonely place to be, and he's got 73 kilometers to ride, so it's not like he's not got to start thinking about, well, I could do with some help, I could do with some wheels. Anyway, enough about Peter for the time being. And then we've got the now this was 5, so of course Peter's dropped off. So we've got these 4 riders here, 3 OTR and Antala, and this is over. I mean, there's no way Antala is going to get the better of these guys. They're just too clever. They're working so well together. They're just going to work him over, and they've got all the time in the world to do it. I mean, they've done 25 kilometers, so they've done a quarter of the distance, but they've got so much time to work Antala over that the winner's going to come from OTR without a doubt. I mean, everybody knows that now. But how they win it is going to be an interesting battle. I just wish that the riders that had signed up, we had 43 signed up for this event, and on the line we had, what, 20? I really, really wish that everybody had turned up, because with larger groups on the road, the dynamic would have been completely different. I mean, OTR are just bossing this now, and that's great. It's great for OTR, but in terms of the race outcome, I'm sorry, but we're a quarter way into the race and the outcome is already settled in my mind. It's going to be one of the OTR boys, and I have a good feeling I know who that's going to be, but we'll wait and see what happens on the climbs. I know who the strongest rider in this group is, that's for sure. But a lot can change. I mean, Antala could end up being a lot stronger than we saw that last night with one of the riders that I never even considered. Let me try and recall his name. He rode the whole ride in the group. I can't. It may come to me. But this particular rider who took the sportive win last night, he rode in the group and he basically was unnoticed. When I say unnoticed, I was calling out the names of the riders, of course I was, but I wasn't sort of like mentioning him as a potential winner, because he just rode in the group. He rode a good ride. He didn't look anything special. But then, you have to remember the sportive was 95 kilometers, and at like the 90-kilometer mark, the guy's putting out fantastic watt kilos. They'd been running at around 3 to 4 watt kilos, and then in the last 5 kilometers, he was putting out 5, 6, 7 what kilo, and it just stunned me. I just didn't think he had that kind of strength because he never showed it at any time in the ride. So you can never take it for granted. Just because a rider isn't showing strength in a group ride doesn't mean it's not there. And after last night, I won't make that mistake again. I won't. Antala's riding here, and I'm not going to discount him because, you know, he could well be much, much stronger than the riders around him. Who knows? And we're not going to find out until, later in the race when they start working him over. And that'll be the test when the guys start working him over and jumping off the front. And he's going to have to close the gaps on them. He can't afford to let them go. And that's going to be incredibly difficult. We've seen it happen in real life. Teams working over a rider. And we've seen riders strong enough to withstand that and win the races. So I'm looking forward to this battle. And they're putting out some decent wattage. I mean, Nantala's, he's putting out high threes. So he's not hanging about. Anyway, let's check up on what's happening a bit further back. I mean, Bukwavo's putting out decent wattage as well. So he's a strong rider. It surprised me to see him drop, to be honest. And he's a clever rider. He knows what he's doing. So I admit this is one surprise I didn't expect. I didn't expect to see him out here riding on his own. But who knows? He could be saving it for the climbs, and you can close 200 and 300 meters easily once the terrain starts going uphill. No problem at all. It's when it gets to 500 and above that gets a little bit more difficult, depending on the length of the climb. I mean, you can close 500 meters if it's a long enough climb and steep enough, but that's going to be an interesting dynamic. We'll see how it does. And we'll check on this group now. Now this group are riding nicely together, and like I say, there's no reason at all for the OTR boys to have a show of strength in this group just yet. Just do your turn on the front, just keep it going nice and when I say do the turn on the front, I'm not talking about pushing the pace. I mean, if they, like at the moment, you've got Sakini going to the front and Simmons and this, they don't have to be pushing the pace up at the front because they don't want to be closing the gap on their teammates. So just roll it around, allow the other riders to push the pace. It's good riding, good sensible riding by Team OTR in both groups. And these two are working nicely together, taking it in turns. This is going to be a long coverage, folks, so I may occasionally switch to another view for a few minutes, and just one of the things I would like to do is talk about the sponsors, and I'm a complete neutral. I'm not being offered any incentives to promote our sponsors, Torm Cycle Clothing, but I had a look at their website last night for the first time. Well, yesterday afternoon, actually, just before the race. And I had a look at the website, and the quality of the clothing, in my mind, is up there with the best. I mean, I've previously been sponsored by Lickall, and they make some of the nicest cycle clothing on the market. And I think the torm.cc, I've got a jersey coming, I have to say, and I think the torm.cc cycle clothing merino wool is absolutely beautiful. It looks stunning. The design, I like the design of it. The fact that it's merino wool means it's going to be nice to wear. I know when I did the transcontinental race, the ultra endurance transcontinental, I was wearing a merino wool top for that, a Rafa merino wool, and that was absolutely fantastic because you spend when riding the transcontinental, you're spending multiple days in the same jersey because you have to carry all your kit. So you're obviously not going to be carrying 2 and 3 and 4 jerseys. You've got one jersey and you wear it for like however long the event takes you, which can be anything from 10 to, to 16, 17 days. So you begin to smell after after a few days. But merino wool is fantastic at negating that. You just don't seem to smell to the same extent as you would in a lycra jersey or a cotton jersey. So merino for me, if you're an endurance athlete or you're a cyclist that puts in the miles, these kind of events where you're on the bike for 3 hours, I think is superb. You're going to come off the bike and you're not going to be stinking to high heaven. Certainly if you're wearing merino socks as well, which I do. So I'm going to switch views a bit later in the coverage. We're going to have a quick look at the website, just so that you know where to go and so that you can have an idea of what the kit looks like. Because I think we owe it to torm.cc to give them a little bit of promotion. Purely and simply because they're giving away free jerseys and free kit to riders in this event for not an awful lot of, apart from me doing the spiel here about them and how many people are going to be logging on and watching this stream. They're not going to get an awful lot of coverage for covering a race series like this so early in its development. So I'd really appreciate if you guys will visit the website, give them a bit of web traffic, even if you don't intend buying any cycle kit, just nip to the website, have a look around and leave a comment in the comments section of this video and tell me what you think of, whether you like what you're seeing or not. Because I think we have to start supporting people who are supporting RGT and the races. I mean, James has done a wonderful job with this series. The Tour du Monde was like a fantastic event, and he's now come up with this March Monuments idea, and I think he deserves full credit for putting on these events. But so do the sponsors, and torm.cc, that's the website, TORM.cc, are sponsoring it. So get over there, have a look. Anyway, back to the front of the race, and you can hear my alarm going off. So, James is out front. Just let me jump on the bike, turn the pedals. So I'm going to return home to myself. You can see my power. And I've just got to wait for my cadence to show up. There's my cadence. And that's enough. That keeps me in the race. So now we can get back to the front and see what James is up to. So there he is. And he's got a 47-metre gap on the chasing group. You can just see behind him the chasers. Poor old Ontala is being left to close the gap because the 2 OTR boys aren't going to help him. So they're working him over, and we're approaching the first of the smaller hills. You can see from the graphic on the bottom of the screen, the white paddle shows the race leader, which is James, and you can see the free riders behind him, closing the gap on him. But this climb is going to stretch them as well. So let's stay with this front group, see what happens as they approach this climb, and then we'll find out what's happening in the second group on the road behind them. James is looking strong, he's riding well. And Tyler, he's not letting them boss him too much, is he? He's putting in some good figures here. So so are the other boys. This is good riding. I've seen some good efforts here. Determined not to let him open up a gap, that's for sure. And in fact, quite the opposite. They're taking turns to sort of like push him at the front. Great riding. This is exciting stuff. I mean, the racing on RGT, I've been on Swift since almost its inception. I was one of the early adopters on Swift. I've led, and I think I can safely say without exaggeration, I've led thousands of rides on Swift as a group ride leader. And I've raced a fair bit. When I was a lot fitter before the accident, I was like a B grade rider. I wasn't particularly good, but I was steady away. I was a half decent B grade rider on Swift. And the racing was always sort of like, okay, you need to get in the sticky draft and you need to just save your energy by drafting, and then I never had a sprint, so the only chance I had was to sort of like try a breakaway towards the end of the race. But leaving the sticky draft used to be incredibly difficult, and once if you left it and you couldn't stay with the group that you were with, I mean, breaking away was hard enough, but if you got dropped by the group, you've no chance of closing the gap, because the speed by which the groups differential between individuals is just not realistic. I've ridden in real life with elite riders. My training partners were elite riders, and I could close gaps on them. If I got dropped from the chain gang, a good effort would get me back to the back of the chain gang. You can't do that with Swift. You just can't. If you get dropped by the group, you're gone. Goodbye and thank you. You're not going to get back. With RGT, I was having similar kind of problems early on, but now that they've completely dialed in the drafting and the braking, I mean, the braking was the problem with RGT in my early days. I just couldn't fathom it. I couldn't get the hang of it at all. And I'd have riders cutting me across me, and I'd be positioned wrong on the road, and I'd end up getting dropped. And this was noticeable in the Flemish for Beginners series, which James also runs, and fantastic series for beginners. And I was getting dropped in the early races, but nowadays I'm starting to hang with the groups, and that's because I've learned how to do it a bit better, but also because RGT have tweaked the braking and the drafting, and it's pretty realistic now. It's pretty close to realistic. I know when I'm going into a corner now where I need to be, when I need to put the power down to stay, to hold position. And if you don't do that, you get dropped. Simple as that. I mean, there's so many threads on RGT forum about getting dropped with the braking and the corners, but it's all about positioning, and it's all about when to put the power down, where to position yourself. I'm still learning. But there's a guy called Jonathan Crane who's got an excellent stream going on RGT and on Swift, but he races on RGT, and he's put together some really good videos that sort of like show you how to adopt, how to behave in the corners and this lot. And that's helped me. I've watched his videos through, and I've become a little bit more clued up on how to draft and how to approach the corners. So racing on RGT has improved tremendously. I think it's so much more realistic than Swift. Swift is a game. RGT is more like real life and very, very enjoyable for that, because you can see these guys using team tactics here. They're letting Antala do the work. You know, let him do the work at the front, and full credit to the guy. He's, you know, he's got nobody to help him, and he's churning it out here. This is a very impressive ride from Antala. Very impressive. You know, he's really under the cosh here, and yet he's not buckling at all. Anyway, let's have a look and see what's happening with Neo's group behind, because these guys are just about to crest the climb. Let's check back on Buchwavel. It's gone out to just over 300, so he's maintaining his gap. He's not letting it grow too much. But here we are. This is Group 2 on the road, and they're 1.2 kilometers behind. Well, 1.6 kilometers behind the leaders. So that's a gap which is not going to get closed, and I think these riders know that, so they'll be riding for their own positions here. They might well catch Buchwavel, but I doubt it. So they're going to be fighting for 6 to 10 here place amongst themselves. And I don't expect to see any fireworks in this group until much later in the race because of that. If they were fighting for first place, then yes, I think we'd already be seeing the stronger riders in this small group showing their mettle. But that's not going to happen here because there's no need, they can save it. So this is Group 2 on the road. 5 riders. And then you've got Nagy and Jobczynski working well together. And this is good riding. This is good, sensible riding, taking turns. We had the same last night in the Sportive. We had 2 riders, an American and a German, and they rode almost the whole event together. Really sensible riding, helping each other on the road. And poor Mr. Ellis, he's once again, don't forget he was with the other group, and he's obviously too strong for them. And you can see from his watt kilos that he's putting out significantly more than Doug behind him. So he's not going to hang about and wait for these guys. He's already decided, okay, no mileage in riding with them. I'm stronger. I'm going to do my own thing. And he may well close up on Nagy and Jobczynski. We shall see. And then you've got Doug and Pandy, and these are part of the group that split away from Flag, and earlier on they were riding together. So these two have broken away. Flag has dropped back slightly. There he is. And then you've got Millard, last man on the road, still churning it out. And as I say, I really hope that all the riders manage to finish. We've got 18 on the road if you count me, and let's hope that all 18 manage to finish. Well, all 17, because I won't be finishing the event. Okay, let's work our way back to the front and see what's happening on that hill now. Here we go. It's nice to see them working so well together, changing position, just taking turns. And they're not hanging about either. They're putting out some good wattage here. You know, Chang's numbers you can see are going red, so he's working hard. It's not like he's easing up. He's just gone over the top of the climb. And it can be important to, I mean, he's opened up a bit of a gap here because he did put in that strong effort over the top of the climb. And that's a good tactic to use as well sometimes because you can get a gap. Let's just swing around and see the guys behind him. Look, so he's split the group. I mean, it's not going to work. These five riders are going to come back together. This climb is just not long enough in terms of the uphill and the downhill to split the group. It's just not long enough. On the bigger climbs, if he does the same, if he keeps it going over the top and on the downhill, putting the power down, then there's a chance of a split, but not on such a short downhill. It's just going to come back together. And you can see it doing so. The two riders are only a few meters behind. So, yeah, Pandy is saying that some of the upcoming hills look like walls. Yeah, certainly. Um, the one at just over the halfway point, almost the 2/3 point, does look like a wall. So steep, and it's bright red, so it's gonna be steep. I don't know what the percentage is there, but it certainly doesn't look easy. These three riders are riding nicely together. Let's just zoom out and there we go. I said they'd all come back together, and I've been cycling since I was 15 years old, and in that now I said that they would probably come together, and they have done. Ellis, that's a great ride by Ellis to close the gap and um, to join these two. Let's just zoom in on them. So he's closed the gap on these two by leaving the other group. That's a really good ride, Ellis. Well done. And I've been, as I was saying, I've been riding since I was 15 years old. So that's like, you know, many decades of riding. Um, and I've done everything in terms of the style of riding. I've done mountain biking, I've done track, I've done road racing, I've done endurance riding, I've done mountain bike orienteering. How many people remember the Polaris Challenge series in the UK? I was pretty good in that. And I've ridden many sportives in the UK, as well as organising one of the biggest in Yorkshire, the White Rose Classic. So I've been involved in cycling both from a participant point of view, but also as an organiser with British Cycling. And then we went it alone, myself and um, my long departed wife, and we ran. It became the White Rose Challenge because British Cycling kept the name and refused to let us use it. So we called it the White Rose Challenge and ran it for charity. We ran it for a cancer charity. Very successfully. Over 1,000 riders signed up every edition we ran, and so cycling's been in my blood for a long time, but I've in that time I've gained a real understanding and a real appreciation uh, for racing, for tactics, for there's Pandy. Now he's riding on his own. There's Flag. And there's Millard. So these three riders at the back here, this is our Lantern Rouge. Then you've got Flag, he's riding on his own at the moment. He's midway between Doug and Millard. And then Doug is catching up with Pandy here. So these two should ride together. And then of course you've got Ellis, who joined Nagy and Jobczynski. So these three should stay together for a little while. And then we've got Group 2 on the road, the 5 riders. And they're approaching the first of the really challenging climbs. It's only short, but it's going to be a challenge. So I'm going to flick over to the front group and see what's happening to find out. Here we go. There's Brook Marvel. Now he's doing well. He's actually closed up some of the gap on the leaders, although it looks like here we go. James has jumped off the front again. There you can see. Now I said earlier that I'd wait until the climbs to say who I think is one of the stronger riders in the group. Well, obviously that stronger rider in the group is James, but the tactics he's using here, he might well be one of the strongest riders in this group, but I don't think he'll end up being the winner, because I think he's doing this for his team. I can't see him winning the event. He's going to burn too many matches. By the time they get to the end of the race, I just don't think he's going to have the strength if one of the other riders puts in a surge. So, but that's just my take. All I can do is call it the way I'm seeing it. And while James is undoubtedly one of the strongest riders in this group, I think by the time we get towards the end of the race, he'll have done his part for his team. And that's, you can't ask any more of a teammate than that. Now, the question is the race organiser allowed to take one of the most combative prizes? I don't see why not, but there's a long way to go yet before we even get into that discussion about who we're going to nominate. What I will do is ask my viewers that are watching this this live stream, please not only leave a like for the video if you are enjoying it, and consider subscribing, because that will certainly help me, but please consider commenting on the race. Add a comment and tell me who you think is the rider that's putting in like the best effort, because that would certainly help somewhat towards the choosing the most combative rider. If we can get the general public to say, well, yeah, I think this rider put in the best effort, then that's definitely going to help us, and it would definitely help Paul from torm.cc make a decision as to who takes the most combative rider prize. So please comment, please like, and please subscribe. But if you comment as well, that's going to help. Now James has just sat back and allowed one of his teammates, who I'm just going to wrong one, there we go, pulling out a 100 meter gap. Now that's pretty impressive. 6.2, 6.6 watt kilos. So he's working really hard to push this gap. Now, what are your thoughts here, folks? What do you think? Do you think Turcotte is going to keep his lead, or do you think this is just one of many efforts that he's going to have to make? I don't think he'll keep this lead. I expect at least two of the other riders to come back to him. I mean, look at Brook Warvel. He's now back up into fourth. So let's go back down the field and see what's happening, because you've got Antala, who, poor fella, is having to work his heart out because he's really being worked over by the OTR boys. But what about Brook Warvel coming back? I mean, what a ride! That is some gap to close and come back. And James is not going to help him. He's not going to help him close this gap. So this is a very, very impressive ride by this fellow, Peter. And I was impressed with him last night. I mean, the fact that I think he rode something like 60 odd kilometers last night. So to do this the following day, that's a hell of a ride. Very, very impressed. And if he manages to close the gap and get back to the front group, well, what can you say? Amazing ride. Okay, let's check out what's happening behind. So these five, they're just not they're not going to fight with each other. They're just going to ride together, stay as a group, because there's no benefit to jumping off the front and sitting in no man's land at this point. Later on, yes, but at this point, there's no common sense in jumping off and riding on your own. You might as well stay with the group, enjoy riding. And there we go. We got the five riders just strung out, going up the climb, and I expect them to stay that way for a while. Then you got these three riders. I mean, another good ride today is Ellis to close the gap on Nagy and Jobczynski, and then he's now leading them out. So this is a good ride from that fellow. Really nice riding. Poor old Pandy, he's left in no man's land, although Doug's not far behind him. So here we go. As I speak, he closes the gap. So these two really should ride together. Pandy should put his foot down and get on Doug's wheel. In fact, he's trying. Look, you can see he's raising his pace to get on his wheel. And that's what he needs to do. He needs to ride with Doug. He doesn't want to be, left behind. Because Mr. Flagg, who is left behind, he's 780 metres off those two. He's not going to close that gap, not unless he's a really good climber. So this poor fellow is going to ride the remaining 56 kilometres all on his own. And I hope he does so. We've had one rider drop out. You can see there's now 17 riders online. I don't know who it is. My memory isn't so good that I can remember all the riders and the order that they were in. So I'll have to look at the footage to see who's dropped out. I'm saying I'll have to look at the footage. There's four riders here, so who's jumped off this group? And there's Chang has. He looked strong, did Chang, so he's jumped off the front. I'll stay with this group while I jump on my bike again. This is another reminder. So I'm saying I'll stay with them. I need to go home just to check my wattage and cadence. So if it's working, there's my power. Come on, cadence. There's my cadence. And I only need to do a couple of turns and then it's back on the bike. Back off the bike and back to commentary. So there we go. So let's find out. You've got Turcotte still hammering it off the front. Opening up a nice gap now. And there's the halfway point. I still don't think this is enough. I don't think Turcotte is, this gap will hold. I could be wrong. But I don't see that gap holding. And in fact, you can see Antala is actually bringing that gap down. What have I by this chap? Being made to do all the work. He's not getting any help. I mean, the tactic here for Johnson is purely and simply, if you see his wheel going in front of Antala, he'll actually be trying to slow it down. It'll be easing up as he takes over the lead. And there's a classic example. You saw him drop to 2.4 watt Kickr. So that's the tactic. If Antala does allow him to pull ahead of him, then Johnson just simply drops his pace. And you can see Antala saying, I'm having none of that. So he starts to put the pace down. That's a classic race tactic. You ride with somebody in second place, you half wheel them, you go just in front of them, and then you start to ease up your pace, hoping that the rider will sort of like want to stay alongside you or even behind you, and that slows him down. And that's not going to happen. Antala's too racecrafty for that, I think. But these two, I mean, James is doing a fantastic ride, but Peterbrook Gravel is just, I'm stunned by this ride. I think it's fantastic. Let's see what whether Chang managed to hold his. Now Chang has opened up a gap on his group, and this is pretty impressive and may well hold, because he's now got a 230-meter gap, although they look like they're closing it down. They're going to have to close this down quickly before he gets halfway up the next climb, and if they don't pull back a good portion of this gap, then they're not going to close it, because he's just going to charge on ahead on the next climb. So they need to be closing this gap on the downhill, which they are doing. You can see it coming down from 160 to 155, now 154. So they're closing the gap, and they need to close it even more before he hits the next climb. Otherwise, they're not going to catch Chang. There they are, chasing hard. So Neil's leading out the OTR boys, but they really need to chase hard here. Yeah, the OTR lads are doing the main chasing here, because they want to pull back Chang. They're not chasing because they want to pull back the front group. They want to pull back Chang. So there he is, and you can see exactly what I said. They needed to pull him back quickly, because if he gets to the next climb, and that's just about to start, with a significant lead, and don't forget he had over 200 meters. If he'd got to the climb with a 200-meter gap, they wouldn't have closed it, whereas now he's just got a 30-meter gap and they're closing in on him. So this is going to come back together. Good effort though, Chang, well done. It's nice to see him going for the combativity prize. So I suspect these riders are going to more or less stay together up this next climb now. Chang will need to take a breather. He's not going to push on again unless another rider jumps off the front, but I doubt it. So let's find out what's happening off the front. Okay, Turcotte's got a 270-meter gap now, so we'll keep an eye on that. Is he going to be able to keep it going? You've got some really steep and longer hills coming up. So can he keep this gap, or is it going to close? I mean, they're closing in on him now, but like I say, we're on the downhill section, so you'd expect that to happen. Once they get to the bottom of this this climb, which is happening pretty quickly, that's the time to look at the meters and see whether it's climbing or whether they're closing the gap. I mean, you can see from the watt kilos he's putting out. Don't forget he's on a 3.1 downhill slope here. Obviously it's leveling out now, but he's on a steep downhill slope and he's still putting out 4 watt kilos. So this guy is working really hard to maintain this gap. It's not like he's taking advantage of the downhill. He's working really hard. Antala's working really hard behind him to try and close the gap. So we'll go to Antala. But then you've got Johnson just sat on his wheel, not doing anything. I mean, 1.6 watt kilos is just, which is clever. I'm not criticising Johnson. That's the correct tactic to use. Sit on his wheel, don't do any work. So yeah, but poor Antala's just having to put in 4 watt kilos just to try and bring the gap down, which is done. To be fair to the guy, he's brought it down from over 200 to 182 now. So he is closing the gap, but how long can he continue to be the sole rider doing the work to bring the leader back? I don't know. It's a big ask, because behind these two, you've got these. James is just going to sit on Brookwavel's wheel. There's no need to do any work whatsoever. And you can see he's 2.1 watt kilos, so he's not working at all. He's just sat on the wheel doing what he needs to, letting Brookwavel do the work. Again, very clever riding by James. Now the dynamic would be completely different. Let's just suppose that these are the leading 2 riders on the road. Then if these were the leading 2 riders on the road, what James is doing would be unacceptable. They've got a gap. He would be expected to work and maintain that gap. He wouldn't be allowed to just sit on another rider's wheel and let him do all the work. That just wouldn't happen. Certainly he'd be slated for it. But the fact that it's James's teammates that are in front of them, and in particular it's Turcotte, the number 1 rider on James's team at the moment, out front, then it's perfectly acceptable for him to sit on wheels and not do any work. Why should he? You're not going to help another rider close up on your teammates. I mean, OTR have been a revelation in this ride. I've seen some really clever team tactics, but they've nailed it here. They've got it spot on. They were working Antala over earlier on in the ride, and when we got to the hills, you got them making a break. First of all, James. And remember, when James was like almost half a kilometre up the road, I did say that there's no way James is going to win this. And you might have thought, well, why not? Because he's got a really good lead. But I knew for a fact that it wasn't a race-winning lead when he went off the front. That's not what he was trying to do. All he was trying to do was stretch out the group and make Antala put in some serious effort to pull him back. So very clever riding by Team OTR. And Mr. Turcotte, I still maintain that this is not a race-winning lead by any means. I think he's going to get pulled back by Antala. And that a small group, I don't know whether Brookwavo will be able to close the gap. It's possible with this steep climb coming up, but I don't know. But certainly I expect the top three to come back together and be battling it out a bit later on in the ride, with the two OTR guys working over Antala even more. Now, if Antala can actually stay with them and contest the win here, that will be one of the best rides I've ever seen. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but if it did happen, it would certainly be right up there with one of the best D races I've ever watched. And I've watched my fair share. Even though commentating, I'm still new to the game. Okay, let's check out what's happening behind. So there they go. And they are slowly, they're maintaining the gap. I don't say they're closing, but they're maintaining the gap. So, but we're coming to the steepest climb on the whole ride very shortly, as you can see from the white paddle at the bottom of the screen. So this is going to be a real test, and I think we'll see positions change around once they get to this climb, because these two guys, I honestly expect Brookwavo to start closing the gap once we get to the climb, if he's as strong as I think he is. I mean, it's an amazing ride that he's doing here. So, and I'm not going to say I told you so, but I did say these five would ride together and come back together and stay together for a little while longer, at least until they get to this steep climb. You may well see this group break up there. That would be where I would be looking. If I was Neil, I'd be looking at that point to make the break, but we'll see. It depends how strong the other riders in the group are, and they're not going to really know that until they start pushing on. Now Nagy has broken free, and he's putting out some good kilos here. So he's broken free from the riders behind, which is Jobzinski. You can just see him going around the bend up ahead. So sorry, let's just go back to Nagy. There's Nagy, and Jobzinski is just behind him, some 140 meters behind him. So, and then you've got Ellis, and he should have them in sight. Let's just see if we can get a view that shows that. Not necessarily. Can we find the other riders? Can we see them? Switch views this way. Whoops. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that he's actually got the Jobzinski in his sights. Whether he can join him again, because they're pushing hard here on the road. And then Doug has just been dropped now, and he's the last man on the road. So Millard, I think it was, Millard has dropped out, and another rider has dropped out as well. So the riders are dropping now. I mean, this is hard. This is hard work. Full credit to them for sticking with it. Okay, and here we go. They've joined up together now, and Ellis is just steaming on past. I do think that these three will come back together. Nagy, Ellis and Jobzinski. I think they'll come back together. They're close enough within each other. They're not going to catch these guys up front, I wouldn't have thought. They've nearly 2 kilometers to catching these. But you can see this group is just, they're just, I mean, they're not even pushing it here. they're not really pushing the pace here. They're just taking it nice. It's like they're out for a Sunday stroll. So whereas these two are putting the power down 4 watt kilos. So, and because they're on a climb, James is having to put down the watt kilos. He can't draft on an uphill slope. And this is 7.7% at the moment. I think it gets, I was just about to say it gets even steeper. We're up to 8.7. So I'm going to join the leaders now and see what's happening at the front. Okay, so it does ease towards the top of the climb. It's 5.7. But let's watch Turcotte go over the top of the climb and see whether he puts the power down after he's crested the hill. 8.4, 9.1. So yeah, 10.4. So this is the steepest part of the climb towards the top, and this is really going to sort out the ride order, how the riders handle this, and we'll work our way back down once we've watched Turcotte go over the top and the slopes start to come down for Turcotte. Then I'll switch to the next rider on the road and we can watch them. But he's putting out 5 watt kilos, give or take. So you can see behind Antala's putting out more. Not all the time, but on average. So slopes increasing again to 8.4, so it's really steep right at this top section. I mean, this must be hurting. They've ridden nearly 60 kilometers, and then they have to go up this beast. This must be hurting. Okay, and I think as he's on the, you can see it changing from red to the sort of like orangey brown, which means that he's in the transition stage of the climb now. And there we go, it's starting to turn green. So I'm going to join the next rider, which is Antala, and he's managed to leave Johnson behind. So he's putting in a good effort to try and close up on Turcotte. Obviously, Turcotte the gap is going to open significantly now, but then you have to remember that Antala will go over the top, and providing he puts the power down, once he's over the top, he'll quickly close that gap. So he won't close it completely, but he will certainly bring it back down to a reasonable level again. And then you've got Johnson, third rider on the road. He's just coming over the top. These are the two that I want to watch, and I want to see what happens here. So Buckravel, he's not looking as strong as the leaders, I have to say. He's putting in out 4 watt kilos as opposed to the leaders who were putting out closer to 5 or above. So I mean, it's still an amazing effort. The fact that he's even in contention is an amazing ride. He's opening up a bit of a gap on James, but that's not going to hold because James will close that once they crest this climb. And in fact, James is closing up now as we get to the top of the climb. So yeah. Good riding here. So there they go. They're getting to the crest. Let's switch back down and watch this. And you can see all five are within easy sight of each other. So nobody in this group is really taking the bull by the horns and really pushing. I mean, Chang, yeah, he broke free earlier, so you'd expect him to have another dig. And he's putting out more watt kilos than the rest of the guys. But I don't think you'll see these five breaking up just yet. Maybe as we get to the 10% part of the climb, somebody will make a break. But this is the kind of tactic that I would really expect from a small group in second place like this. Second place by second place, I mean second place group on the road. You can't really call Brooke Warrell and James Ogilvy a group. The individuals in between. Now, if you look further back down, you've got Chang out the front, just Sakini and Neil Pugh, but then you've got Bellio just starting to fall off the back, and then behind you've got Simmons, and the gap to those two could open up pretty significantly, pretty quickly, if they don't put in a bit of an effort towards the top part of this climb. Because once you get on the downslope, even though all the riders have got to do the same ride going down, it's going to be the riders up at the front are going to be going faster if they're riding together than an individual if he's left to ride down the slope on his own, and so therefore it makes sense the gap is going to open. So my feeling is that we need to be seeing Bellio and Simmons, and you can see the virtual gap here on the road from Neil. They need to be closing up this gap. But Neil has not allowed, but Neil now has a gap to Sakini in front of him, and he's going to find this difficult. So maybe the fact that they're going down as individuals and not together could benefit them all. Because there might not be sufficient speed difference between them all going downhill to make a huge difference. It's a tough call. Although Chang, you can see his numbers are red, so let's just move forward to Chang, who's being caught by Sakini. But Chang is really putting in an effort here. Look at his numbers. He's been red now for quite a while, so he's really putting in a dig towards the top of the climb at the steepest point, which is, you know, the right place to put in a dig at the climb's steepest section. And my guess is he's probably taken a look at this profile and thought, okay, this is where I'm gonna have another dig. But Sakini's doing really well as well. He's there we go. There's my alarm going off. So I'm afraid I have to leave the action here once again and just go back to myself and turn the pedals, and then we'll return to the front of the race. There's my power, and there's my cadence. Okay, so now we can get back to the race. Okay. Interesting that Turcotte has managed to maintain a decent gap But that Antala has now opened up a significant lead on Johnson. So this fellow is strong. I suspected as much earlier. And it's too early to call yet, but it could well be between these three, between Johnson, Antala and Turcotte now, because there's Johnson on the road, and he's 680 metres behind his teammate Turcotte up front, with Antala in the middle of them. So it's really going to be between those three, possibly. Brookwavel further 900 metres back with James, and working like a Trojan. I'd love to see him. I really would love to see him get back up amongst the leaders, but I'm not sure it's going to happen. He's 1.5 kilometres off the leader. Is that too much to bridge? I don't know. Interesting dynamic. I really hope that he can close the gap, because it will make for a more exciting race. But to my mind, the race really is between the front three. And I don't have to be a genius to say that, just looking at the distances involved. And primarily, you could make the argument that the race is between the front two. But I don't know. I just don't. I have a feeling that OTR aren't out of this yet in terms of second or third place. I still think we've got some action to see. And I think James, the fact that he's sitting on the wheel for such a long period with Peter, I think he's going to have some power left at the end of this ride. So we'll see. The unknown, of course, is you never know. I mean, the distance, it's not just about putting out the power. Sometimes the distance itself can be the determining factor. Some riders just aren't used to riding 100 kilometres for a race. And I think James actually said in one of the comments that this was going to be one of the longest races he's done. So how you handle race distance when it starts to get to this length, 95, 100 kilometres, is completely different to how you handle a 30, 40 kilometre race. And you just don't know sometimes how your legs are going to hold up. I mean, I was cramping I did a 40 kilometre race the other week, and my legs were starting to cramp towards the end because I haven't been doing any really long rides. So, and I was getting stitches as well on some of the rides because I'm pushing a bit harder than what I'm used to. Let's work his way back and see what's happening behind. So you can see Sakini and Chang have opened up a nice gap now. They've come back together and they've opened up a nice gap on Neil, who's out there in no man's land between the groups. So you've got these two working nicely together, and then you've got Neil, and then behind Neil you've got Bellio and Simmons, who I said would probably get dropped. But they're only 150 metres behind Neil, and so I'd expect them to close that. I really would. I don't think Neil's going to spend too much time riding on his own. I think these two are going to join him. And they certainly look like they're working. So, yeah. And then Jobczynski looks like he's left behind Ellis again. So, but there's only a short gap between them, so expect them two to ride together some more later in the event. We've got 40 kilometres for these guys to ride, so I'd expect these two to join back together. I don't think Nagy will be a feature now. I think he's He's too far behind, so he's last man on the road, and I think will remain last man on the road. It's just going up the very, very steep climb. So I think Nagy will stay the last man on the road, not counting me, of course. I mean, they're on the steep downslope now, so you're going to get distance between them, but I think this will close up, and you'll see those two together coming together. And I do think in fact, they are doing the closing up on Neil, give or take. 1 minute it's closing, next minute it's going out. So I think they'll close the gap on Neil. And will that small group then of three, when they join together, close up the gap on these two? I don't know. 400 metres, bit of an ask so late in the race. You just have to admire Peter Bukwavo, though. Just nobody to help him, no teammates, just, yeah. Is it going to be fourth place for him? That's the big question. Can he close a 760 metre gap? And if he does, that's the man he's going to catch. Don't know. And then obviously the really exciting thing is, can Antala catch Turcotte? And you know what? I think he will. I really do. I really think he will. I think this guy's strong. And already I can say that if Antala does make the catch, he will be without a shadow of a doubt. The fact that he's a lone rider, no teammates, has had to fend off so many OTR riders attacking him, not least of all Turcotte zooming off the front and getting such a big gap. If he does manage to close this up, and even if he doesn't win, I think you've got our most combative rider here, because this is just a fantastic effort to do what he's done. And I mean, they were really working him over. You saw it yourselves earlier on in the ride. The OTR guys in the green shirts were just really working him over, and he's come through it. He's in second place on the road, which is just amazing. But James has done a very clever ride. Let's just pop back to James. He's done a very clever ride. I'm just so impressed with the way that he's put the team before himself. Of that, there's no doubt. He's the kind of teammate I'd like to have anyway, that's for sure. And then, you got this fella. What can you say about him? It's been a stunning ride from this fella as well. So there's not just one person in the running for the most combative. You've got half a dozen. I mean, let's just go further down the field, and you've got Chang, who's made a couple of digs to try and leave behind the group of 6 that he was with, that then turned into 5, and that's now turned into 2, him and Sakini. He's worked really hard to get this gap. And yes, he's been caught by Sakini, who's now looking like the stronger of the two. But that depends. I mean, Chang could make another dig on the next climb and leave him, but Sakini's looking strong, I have to say, and it doesn't look like he's put in the kind of effort that Chang has to get where he is. He looks like overall stronger rider that's just saving his powder. That's my call anyway. That's the way I'm seeing it. I'm seeing him as one of these clever riders who doesn't show his cards early. I think we'll see him finishing in front of Chang. But so you've got Chang also in the running for the most combative. Then you've got a couple of really good efforts from the guys further behind, not least of all, Ellis has been really good. Jobzinski's been really good. I mean, Ellis has done a fantastic ride as well. So I asked you earlier, folks, those that are watching and those the live stream, leave a comment in the comments section and let me know what you think. Who do you think the award should go to? I mean, we're almost 2/3 into the race now, and so I think it's time to start seriously thinking about the most combative rider. And who would your choice be? I'm still undecided, but I'm leaning towards this fellow here or this fellow here. And look, he's closing the gap on this climb. This is an amazing ride. Now this climb is long enough. The other short climb was about 1 kilometre long. This one is double that. So it's going to be long enough to. In fact, let's check the distance. We're at 7. We'll say 70. So we'll see what its distance is showing when he gets to the top. Let's just see. Johnson is just arriving at the base of it now. Yeah, just give or take. So it's more than 2 kilometres possibly then. But it's long enough to sort them out, but not as steep as the previous climb. So this kind of climb will probably suit, rather than the lighter rider, will probably suit the stronger rider, if that makes sense. I can't take as much because I'm a lightweight rider. I'm currently hovering around the 63 kilo mark, probably a bit less now because I've lost a bit of weight. But I'm about the 63 kilo mark. And the steeper climbs, I can probably make up a little bit more time on the steeper climbs on the stronger riders than what I do on sort of like the 6% slopes. Because they can just push out at 6%, whereas when it gets to 10%, I'm able to get out of the saddle and use my weight advantage. I'm not a great climber, but I'm not half bad when it comes to the really steep gradients. And then Tyler looks like he's stronger on the lesser gradients rather than the really steep ones. So I think this climb is going to suit him. But having said that, Turcotte is obviously on the easier section. Let's go back to Turcotte. Yeah, he's on the 3.9% part of the slope, so that's why he's pulling out a little bit of a gap here, because he's on the easier section. He's now getting into the more steeper section, the 6%. But this is a good race. This is where the action is now, first and second, I think. Obviously, to show fairness to all the other competitors, I can't just concentrate on these two. I have to, show what's happening on the rest of the road. This is third man on the road, Mr. Johnson. And this has been a good ride from him as well. He's worked well with his team, and he's worked well to try and stay in front of this fellow here, Brookwire. And again, a great ride from him. James is just behind him, keeping him in check. So expect that to remain the same. I don't think this climb is going to drop James. I think he's going to keep Brookwire in sight right to the very top. So and then Sakini has proved what I thought earlier, slightly stronger than Chang, but we are approaching the climb, so we'll see what happens on the climb. But I do feel that this fellow is slightly stronger than Chang, who's now closing in on him. But I could have got that wrong. We'll see. And then I suspected these would join up together, and they have done so. So they're gonna ride together for a little while. The climb will probably sort them out. Tired legs and all. You can't expect riders to stay together so late in a race if they're not working together as a team. Although Simmons and Pugh could well end up working together. And then these two are obviously going to stay together for a little while, at least to the base of the climb, I would have thought. And then last man, Lantern Rouge on the road. And Nag is putting in a decent amount of effort, so he's not giving up the ghost by any means. He's not sort of like sitting up and saying, "Okay, I'm just going to get to the finish." He's actually working hard. So full credit to him. But back, so let's work his way back to the front, because that's where the action is, and that's what I want to see. I want to know what happens with these two. This is an interesting dynamic. I'm calling Sakini out of these two, but we'll see whether I've called it correctly as we get further into the race. So there's that going on. There's this one going on. The fact that James is not having to do any work at all other than stay with Brookwire, I think he may well overhaul him. So James could well be looking at fourth place or better, because there's no reason why they can't close the gap to Johnson. It's only 350 meters, so I'm saying only. That's enough, but that's closable. That's closable. Put in a good dig, put in a good effort, and you can start to bring that down. But then you've got this fellow, and Turcotte has opened up the gap again. Now I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because, let's go back to Turcotte. Turcotte's on the easier section, and Tyler's on the steeper section, slightly steeper, but yeah, that's possibly why we're seeing the distance changing. Just look at the difference in slope. You've got 6.1 for Antala, and we were down to the green section for Turcotte. So he may keep this gap. He may keep this gap all the way to the end. What's going to be interesting here is watching the power output on the downhill. It's a very steep downhill. A lot of riders at this point, having done 75 kilometers plus, would probably ease off the gas and recover on such a steep downhill. So it'll be interesting to see whether these two riders do. I mean, Turcotte's working really hard on the transition part of this climb. As the slope eases, he's still putting out 5.4 watt kilo. So he's really trying to make sure that he doesn't allow the gap to fall. And Antala is not able to match that. So this could be the race winning break. It could go all the way out. Who's the better descender? We'll need to check on that. Is it this fellow or is it Turcotte? Chang looking strong, but as I say, and is Sakini. I don't know. I just have this feeling that Sakini has got more in his tank than Chang has, but we'll see whether I'm reading it correctly. They're only just on the start of the climb, so they've a long way to go. We need to and then you've got the other two OTR boys and Bellio, so they could decide to stay together on this climb, or they could decide to split it up. I think it's a difficult call because when you're only riding from the minor places, are you going to sort of like save your really big effort for the last climb? Because after this one, we've got one more climb coming up, and then it's all downhill to the finish. So it's going to be a fast finish. Of that, there's no doubt. And there's Ellis riding along with Shablinski. They've done a sterling job together. And of course, Nagi's still putting it out there. So let's check on the distances. We've got 29.5 kilometres by Nagy. We've got 28.5 kilometres by these two, Ellis and Shablinski. Then we've got 27 kilometres by Neil and his teammate and Bellio. And Chang is another half a kilometre in front of them, with Sakini just in front of him. Then you've got a fair old gap to these two. So there's a decent gap there. There's a 2 kilometre gap between Sakini, who's now pulled in front of Chang, only just like. But you've a 2 kilometre gap there, so I don't see that being closed. So I think the top 5 is as is. Positions may change in that top 5 and think will do so. I don't think we're seeing the top 5 as it will finish now. Because I think James is just, with not having to do any work here, he's just going to prove too strong for Peter. And then you've got Johnson. So what we got? You've got 400 metres in front of them with Johnson. Need to get back on the bike again. So I'll just head home and jump back on. I'm glad I set these alarms because I would have forgotten had these alarms not been going off. I'm getting really engrossed in the race, in the tactics, in trying to give you all a feel of how I'm calling it, which is not necessarily going to be the way it's going to finish. But so I'm really he's on the steep downhill now. Look, 8.2% slope. So now, like I say, the interesting thing here is that And Tyler hasn't started the descent yet. Turcotte's putting out 2.5 kilo, watt kilo, give or take, 2.2, 2.3, 2.5. So he's putting out 2.5 watt kilos, shall we say, average. Let's see what happens. So let's go down to Tyler as he comes over the top, and you can see he's just about to come over the top now. Is he going to put out, and he needs to, if he's going to have any chance of closing the gap, he needs to really hammer it down on the downhill. And he's doing so. So he's on the 6.1, and he's putting out slightly more watt kilos at the beginning of the descent than what Turcotte did. So he may well close the gap slightly, but Turcotte's got a huge gap on such a steep descent. And can he carry that through the flat section or rolling section towards the next climb? I don't know. I mean, Tyler's putting in more watt kilos. He's working harder on the downhill. So surely he deserves some reward for that. Yes, he's working significantly harder on the downhill section. Yeah. Okay, let's see what's happening behind. Johnson is just about to come to the crest as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens between these two on the downhill, because that's a definite chance for them to split. James putting in an effort now because he knows he has to be on his wheel as they approach the top of the climb, because this descent is going to split, folks. So just going to stay with these two just as we go over the top and see see whether James tries to hold his wheel or whether he tries to go past. This could be the determining factor in the ride between these two, I think. Okay, here we go. Just about getting to the top of the climb now, so you have to say, looking at the scenery, the clouds, and the rain coming down as well at times, RGT have done a good job with this graphics pack. They call it the Spring in Europe course pack, and I think they've done a really nice job with it. We'll get back to the front shortly, guys, but and girls. But I just want to see what's going to happen as they hit the downslope. Whether one of them decides to put the power down, or whether they just I mean, they just look like they're easing over the top at the moment. But this is what I want to see. Yeah, okay, so James's numbers going red and then easing off. So, and Brookwavel is not really putting the power down at all. He's just, my guess is he's recovering here. So, yeah, they're probably going to ride together. I think they're probably going to stay together on the downhill, these two. There's not a significant effort being put in by either of them. So let's go back. Let's find out what's happening with this race here. Okay, so we've now got a 1 kilometre plus gap, and we're only 17 kilometres from the finish. I don't know. I think that might be a bit too much. Might be a little bit too much. It's been a cracking race, though. I mean, some really good dynamics going on. Let's head to the front. This fellow's strong. He's putting in some really good effort here. He's really strong. Looking all the way like he's going to hold this to the end. It doesn't look like faltering at all. So there was a point where I thought Antala was going to close the gap, but I'm now looking at the gap not closing and thinking, no, it's not going to happen now. And also, if you look at the watt kilos being put out by both riders, yes, Turcotte is probably the possibly the bigger rider because his watt kilo numbers are higher all through all sections of the ride. So that suggests that he's a bigger rider, but it could just be a lot stronger. It could just be stronger. But it is looking now like we have our winner on the road. I just don't see that kind of a gap being closed now. So I think we're looking at Turcotte first and Antala second, and then it's who's going to take the other places. I think Johnson will hang on to his third place, but fourth and fifth, who's your money on? And you've got to consider, you know, the competitive prize for Peter here. Don't know. Like I say, please leave a comment in the comments section and let me know who you think deserves it. Sakini has broken away from Chang and got a decent gap now. He's got a 480 metre gap. So I called that one correctly. I did say he looked stronger than Chan, even though he was trailing him earlier on in the ride. Shows that sometimes I do know what I'm talking about. But yeah, but this has been a good ride by Chang. He was attacking earlier on, just didn't have the strength to keep it going at the latter part of the ride. There we go, I'm just going through suppressor. But so this has been a good ride by Chang. And then, of course, we've got these three riders were staying together. They don't look like swapping places around much until a bit later on in the ride. So Brzezinski has accepted his slot and he's now left behind Ellis. They may well come back together. Who knows? Those two, Brzezinski and Ellis, may well come back together. We've already said that Nag is definitely going to be Lantern Rouge. I just hope he finishes the event. He deserves to. Anybody doing almost 100 kilometres certainly deserves to finish. Neil's looked really good today as well. He's ridden well. But hats off to his team. I mean, I don't know whether they're on Discord, whether they're talking to each other. There's been not very little chat on the. I've had chat on the screen, and you've seen yourself. There's been very little typing, very little chat happening that way. But maybe people are using Discord and talking on Discord, because the race tactics today from Team OTR have been superb, and you've got to say credit must go to Neil and James, because I think they're the two main organisers in OTR when it comes to team tactics. As I say, Chang has left Sakini to go on in front of him. Well, not left, but not being able to close the gap on him. So Sakini has done a good job at opening up the gap. And as I say, my feeling with Sakini was that earlier on in the ride, he was just not showing his cards. He was obviously a stronger rider and just not showing it. He was just, and we've seen that so many times. I saw it yesterday in the sportive. The rider that eventually took the first place in the sportive was a rider that just, never looked like he was going to do anything until the time came for him to just ride away. So while he's not winning the race, Sakini's in that class. He's just a rider that just doesn't get noticed, and then just when he needs to, can put the power down. But this is now, you have to say, this is now the most interesting part of the race, the place for fourth and fifth, because I think this is going to go all the way to the wire between these two. I think James will possibly have the advantage because he's not doing any work. But if Brook Wavell can hold him off and take fourth place, that would be a fantastic ride and a fantastic achievement. Sorry, wrong way. And Johnson has just been riding on his own in the middle of the groups now for a considerable amount of distance. So you've got to take your hat off to this fellow. Really good ride. It's so hard riding on your own, kilometre after kilometre, just sitting in the middle, knowing you're not going to catch the people in front, not prepared to ease up and let the people behind close the gap on you. That's good riding. That's hard work. But I would have liked to have seen this gap come down, and I don't think it's going to happen now. So 12 kilometres to go, another, 30 minutes of racing, give or take. And then you've got Turcotte. And the gap is not changing much here. It's more or less staying the same, just over a kilometre, 1 kilometre and 100 metres. So the gap isn't changing, but it doesn't need to. If he maintains, that gap going into the climb, or even increases it, then it's not going to get closed down. I've seen riders leave it till the last few kilometres and then put in an effort and do some amazing things, but that's not likely to happen on a ride of this nature, where the riders have got 90 kilometres in their legs, and there's not going to be a significant change in their outputs. Coming in towards the finish of that, I'm convinced. So folks, let's just work his way back down the field again and see what's happening. But as well as commenting on who you think deserves the combativity prize, how about leaving me a comment and telling me what you think of my coverage? This is by far the longest race I've ever covered. I did 3 hours last night on the Sportive. That was a lot easier to cover in terms of I just waffled on, and because I didn't have to discuss any racing tactics, so it made the coverage in those terms a lot easier. Although sitting for 3 hours and waffling on is not easy and never easy for anybody. But I'd welcome your thoughts on my coverage today. Do you think I've done a half decent job? Have I explained the tactics and what's been going on correctly? Have I made the right calls at the right times? I'd welcome feedback. I'm new to this game, enjoying it, and I plan on doing a lot more if I can get the interest. You can also hit a like on the video, if you will, on YouTube, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'd like to build the channel to the point where one day it's paying for itself, because it is very time intensive. I have a young family. Even though I'm no spring chicken myself, I have a young family, and getting the time away can often be quite difficult. So if I start to earn a little bit of pocket money for the girls from this in the future, and I'm looking well in the future, because I don't see it growing that quickly. But if it did, if we could sort of like look at 2021 to monetizing YouTube, and to do that I need 1,000 subscribers. I think I'm at about 130 at the moment. So if I could get to the 1,000 subscribers and start earning a bit of pocket money to put in the girls' piggy banks, I'm pretty sure that Hilke would let me have a little bit more time to devote to it. And that can only benefit you folks at RGT, and benefit me in terms of allowing me not to have to scrimp and scrape to put on this show. So consider subscribing, hit the like button to let me know that you're enjoying the videos, and most importantly, please leave some comments. Let me know what you're thinking. I certainly want folks to comment on who they think deserves the prize today. And I say that as I watch Antala slowly bringing this gap down. Have you seen this? What's going on screen? Just look at this. The gap's coming down. I mean, this is incredible. It was over almost 1,200 meters, so over a kilometer, and it's now down to 810 and falling. This has got to be one of the... Can he close it? He's got 9.6 kilometers to go to close an 800 meter gap. Is that enough? Can he do it? Has he got the strength to do it? Because Turcotte's not going to give it up without a hell of a fight. And in fact, Turcotte is I think is upping his pace now, because he's realised he's being chased. What a battle! I wish we could have them both on screen at the same time, because this is a fascinating battle. You can't see them both on the same screenshot. I mean, Johnson's a good way behind. He's two kilometers behind, but these two it's now down to 8.4 and 9.2. So yeah, you're looking at 800 meters, which is what it's showing in the rider list. 900 meters now. So Turcotte, when he needs to, is putting the power down. Fascinating. Now you'll also notice we'll work as, while these two are fighting, scrapping it out at the front, we'll work his way further down the field, because you notice that another rider has dropped out. Well, a couple more actually. So you've got Johnson in third place, and he's going to hang on to his third place. Then, as I say, it's a toss-up between these two for fourth and fifth. I've already called who I think will take the fourth and fifth place, but we'll see what happens. And while James is certainly a friend of mine, I'd hate to be right, because I think Peter is up there in terms of the most combative rider. I think he's done a fantastic ride. To come back to the group like he did, and then to ride the way he has, I'd like to see him getting the better of James, but I don't see it happening. I think James is too wily and too clever. So let's move further down the field. Sakini has definitely cemented his sixth place. He's not going to get caught now. Chang is almost a kilometre behind him, so that's not going to change. Although Chang is putting in some nice efforts, I don't see it changing. And then these three, we're going to have to decide who takes the honours amongst these three. So there's a good battle here to watch, and I will cover it. I'm not just going to give up coverage when the first and second people cross the line. I'm going to cover everybody finishing bar myself, because I've still got 81 kilometres to ride, which is not going to happen. Just to explain that statement, basically, in order to cover the event, I have to be a competitor. I have to join the ride. And so you saw there that I had 81 kilometres still to ride. That's because that's where it puts me with the race coverage. And of course, I'm not going to ride 81 kilometres. So these three, there's a really good battle going on here for 8th, 9th and 10th. We'll come back to that later. And then obviously in 11th place, I think Jobczynski is going to keep his 11th place. Although Ellis is only 300 metres behind and could close that gap. So there's certainly enough time to do so, and he's certainly strong enough. He's been a really good, strong rider, as Ellis. So could well. Yeah. Oh, and there goes my alarm. So I'm going to roll down to myself and get back on. As I say, it's a good job I set these alarms, because there's no way I would have remembered to do this when I get engrossed in the coverage. It's very difficult to think of anything else. Okay, time to get back to the front, because our leader is just about cresting the top of the climb. So it's all downhill from here for him. So all he has to do is maintain his lead now. Fantastic ride, Turcotte. Well done. It's not over yet, but I don't see this gap being closed now. 6 kilometres to go, and I think he can just he can relax and just. In fact, that's what he's doing. Is if you look at his watt kilos, having said that, then he starts to put out 5, but that's the commentator's curse. You make a statement and then the rider proves you wrong. But no, he is easing down. Look, he's at 2 now. So he's easing down the steep climb. And that's all he needs to do. His speed will basically open up the gap. Antala is far enough behind on the climb for that gap to go out even more. So by the time he crests the climb, yes, he can close it on the descent, but he's not going to be able to close it enough. Turcotte will have opened up a much larger gap than what you're currently seeing. You're currently seeing 1.6 kilometers, but it's going to be much bigger than that by the time Antala crests the ridge. It's going to be over 2, I think. So he's not going to close the gap, which is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to have seen a tighter battle at the front than this, but you have to give credit where credit's due, and OTR team tactics have worked out perfectly. I called right at the very start, but that's nothing special, but I called out that OTR would take the win because of the numbers they had, and because I knew they would use team tactics to do so. And that's the way it's worked out. And that didn't take a genius to come up with that. So full credit to OTR for putting in place a plan and implementing it perfectly. Because this fellow has earned his win. He's broken away at the right time with the help of his teammates, proved by far the strongest rider in terms of, got the gap, maintained the gap. So a well-earned win there. I'm calling it now because there's no way 2 kilometers are going to be closed. And then you've got Johnson. He's going to take his 3rd place unless you could see that Buchwavl is. Let's have a look because this is exciting. Has left James, and this has surprised me. I mean, there's time for James to come back to him, but this has really surprised me. I knew he was strong. Well done. I mean, this is up there with the ride from Antala. Stunning ride. So come on, guys and girls. I want you to leave your thoughts in the comments section because we have to make a decision. I think we've got 2 clear winners here. I don't know how many prizes there are going to be, but you've got Antala, who definitely deserves to be in the running, and you've got Buchwavl, who definitely deserves to be in the running. But if there was only one winner, who would it be? Who would you choose? Would you choose the fantastic ride that this fellow has made, or the equally fantastic ride that this fellow has made? I mean, he's still trying now. He's still putting in the effort to try and close this gap. It's not going to happen, sadly, but he's still trying. But I didn't expect to see this. I didn't expect Buchwavl to drop James. And admittedly, you have to remember that James was the architect in getting the OTR win. He was making the early breaks. He was doing the running off the front to stretch out the group and to basically determine the final selection. So you have to. I mean, James could well be in the running for his team tactics and the way that he's implemented them. So you need to leave your comments in the comments section for us to choose. But some fantastic riding here. I am so impressed with Peter though. And Turcotte has only 2 kilometers to finish the ride with now. So we're looking at about another 5 minutes of downhill riding with a bit of luck, maybe even less. And then we've got Antala closing in on him, but not going to get there. What a great race this has been. I've really enjoyed covering it, folks. Hope you've enjoyed my coverage. Hope you've enjoyed my insights into the racing and the tactics used and everything. It's been very enjoyable. I think these longer races, wow, what an effort! It's caught Johnson. I thought Johnson had third place sewn up, and Bukwavo's caught him. Unbelievable! That is a stunning ride. Absolutely stunning ride. I'm going to stay with these two just for a while to see whether Johnson can hang on to his wheel or whether Peter manages to ride away. But I also know I'm going to have to go back to the front because I can't, not there. I can't miss Turcotte coming in as he's going under the 1 kilometre to go. So I'm sorry. We're going to cover. I wish I knew the first names. I'm going to have to ask James to let me have people's first names, and then I can use first name terms. Really good ride, Turcotte. Well done. Well deserved win. You've your teammates to thank, of course, but you've the one that's implemented the plan very, very well. And look, he's raising his pace as well as he gets towards the finish. No need to do because he's not going to get caught. But he's putting in 5 watt kilos just to show that he's still got something left. Fantastic ride. Well done. So we'll stay with him in 500 meters to go till he crosses the line, and then we'll switch to the next rider on the road. And you can see Johnson is asking what Pete's doing to him. He must be wrecking him. I can't wait to get back to that fight. But I just want to get Turcotte coming home, and then we'll switch. So I think this deserves a clap. Fantastic. Well done. Great ride. And here's Antala. Okay, now because Antala's 1.9 kilometers still left to do, this is the interesting look. You can see Mr. Johnson is trying to get away from Peter. What a race! I didn't expect. I mean, yeah, we all thought that Peter would have a battle with James. I expected James to be doing this, to be the one challenging towards the end. This is just fantastic. Unbelievable ride. Who's going to get it between these two folks? They've 4.5 kilometers to go. Who's going to take the win between these two? Let's check further down. There's James. He's got 6 kilometers still left to do. Sakini is 7.5. Chang is 8.2. I'm just quickly flicking through here because I want to see what people have got. 9 kilometers from Neil, and 100 meters behind him is his 2 compatriots. So Neil has pushed on ahead of his 2 friends. Then Jobzinski, he's 9.8. Ellis, he's got 10 kilometers. And last man on the road is Nagy, and he's got 12.4. But let's get back to the front. Not Turcotte, of course, he's finished. And Tala, he's got 700 metres to go now. Now, what I'm going to do, folks, is the same as I did with the Sportive. Because the riders have ridden almost 100 kilometres, I think it's only fair that I stay with everybody. So everybody that finishes the race today, I'm not just going to end it with the top 10 or the top 3. I'm going to cover every rider coming in to the end of the ride. And hopefully all those left on the road will finish. And this has been a fantastic ride by Antala. Don't forget that he's had no teammates. He's had to fight off a full team of OTR riders kicking hell out of him, and yet he's managed to come in second place. So this is a stunning ride. This is right up there, and definitely in the running for the combativity prize because of the ride. So well done, Antala. Superb ride. Okay. But these two, now then, who's going to take the honours here? And I think you'll agree with me. You have to put Peter Brookwavel in the running for the combativity prize, if not the winner, because this has just been a fantastic ride. I'd already given him like 4th place or 5th place even behind James. I never expected him, if he finishes on the podium with 3rd place, then that's got to be the ride of the day. Got to be, because he was out of it. He was looking like he was going to be contesting with James, and I really thought James would overhaul him because he was sitting on his wheel for so many kilometres. And yet here he is, he's left James behind, and now he's looking to have a sprint with Peter, with Johnson. I don't know what your first name is, Mr. Johnson. I apologise. So this is going to be an exciting finish, and I think this is going to go down to a sprint. I don't see them leaving each other now because it's all downhill to the finish. You can see the slope's only 0.5, but it's all downhill. There isn't any uphill left, so it's going to come down to a sprint between these two. And in fact, let's see if we can switch to a better view. There we go. That's going to show. There we go. And in fact, let's get in a bit closer to them and watch them, because the sprint really might happen earlier, but you're looking at 300 meters minimum. Sorry, 300 meters maximum. Anybody that goes before the 300 meter point, I think, is not going to be taking advantage of the draft. So, although it does look like Peter is so strong, he's making the effort now, but I don't know, can he keep it going? Has he gone too early? I mean, look at the watt kilos that he's putting out, and then look at the watt kilos. Has Peter given up? Let's flick around behind him. No. So Peter hasn't given up. And you can see from this overhead view, he's got a 20-meter gap. Can he keep it going? Wow. I'm going to stay with this view because I want to see whether Peter manages to close the gap. So we'll stay with this head-on view. Oh, this is just a tremendous ride. It's just absolutely amazing ride. 600 meters to go, and it looks like he's got it. He's got 3rd place. Unbelievable. The ride of the day, without a shadow of a doubt. This has just been stunning. I mean, I knew he was a strong rider watching him last night when I expected him to finish the event because I thought he was going to ride the whole sportive, but he chipped out at about the 60k mark. But to come then the next day and do this, absolutely stunning ride. And there he goes. He's definitely going to finish ahead of Johnson now. Although, having said that, Johnson is really, really, really putting in an effort here. Can he hold it? Can he hold it? This is exciting. Look at this. Look at this. Yes, he gets it. Fantastic ride. Fantastic ride. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. What a race between those two. That was worth waiting for. And here's James. He can afford to take it easy because nobody's going to catch him, and he's only vying for 5th place. I say only, I mean, I'd be over the moon with a position like that. But you have to remember that the win by OTR is mostly down to this fellow here, James Ogilvie, because he was without a doubt the architect of what's happened today. The jumping off the front early, the splitting up of the group. So I think you have to give this man credit. And there he goes under the kite. So 1 kilometre left to ride. In fact, the whole of the you can't just single out one man. The whole of the OTR team, from the winner all the way to, you just saw Johnson there battling it out with Peter Brook-Ravel, and then the other members who have sort of like now been pushed into the background, but who earlier were part of the kicking that they gave Antala. I mean, that was absolutely amazing tactics to constantly keep jumping off the front and stretching out the groups. Really, really good race. Really very, very enjoyable, not just to watch, but to commentate on. And the finish from, I know I keep coming back to it, but the finish from Peter was absolutely stunning. Some good chat as well. The riders are really complimenting each other. Really good, some really good chat going on. But you can't ride 97 kilometers race and not have respect for your fellow competitors. Just there you go, James. Thank you, waving to me. Fantastic ride, mate. Well done. Full marks. So then next on the road, I called this one correctly. I said Sakini would see off Chang, and he's done so by about a kilometre. But Chang, you can see, he's going red. He's working really, really hard to try and close up. Sadly, there's not enough distance left for him to close the gap. But he's not, I'm saying not giving up. Is he on the downhill? Let's just switch to Chang, basically. Oh, he's on the downhill. That's why he's showing 0-0. I'm going to say, please don't have a dropout at this point. We don't want anybody not finishing. I want to see all the rest of the riders here finishing because they've all earned it. Stunning rides. And that's what I'm going to say. Oh, what a race to comment on. Four out of five of the top 5 at OTR riders. Well, yeah, well earned and well deserved. You've you know. So in terms of the race coverage, last man on the road is Nagy, and he's got 6.7 k's to go. So here we go. We've got Sakini going under the kite. So 6.7 k's, call it 7 k's, about another 20 minutes at the most. So we're scheduled to finish in about 3 hours 10, which is a long day for me. And I've got to do it all again tomorrow. And I think the ride tomorrow is actually longer than this one. I'm covering the sportive tomorrow, folks, so please tune in. I'll put links in the groups. And this is fantastic. It's just absolutely stunning. 500 meters. I'm looking forward to a coffee. I must admit, I should have made a flask. I'm gasping now. 3 hours is a long time to sit on my stool. So I think I've earned a like by all those that are watching. I think maybe even you'll consider subscribing. I think I've earned it. 3 hours sat here. So please support me. As Sakini, number 6, rider number 6 on the road comes in. Here we go. Good ride, sir. Well done. And then we have Chang just behind him. So he's just gone under the kite, less than a kilometre behind. So this has been a good ride from Chang. He did the early pushing in Group 2 on the road. Wasn't able to maintain it, sadly. But it's been a good ride. He's managed to hold off Neil and the other riders that were in the group with him. The only one he couldn't overhaul was Sakini. So this has been a good ride by Mr. Chang. Well done. Yeah, I've really enjoyed covering this. Now I've allowed on this video and almost all my other videos, but on this video in particular, I've allowed live chat replay. So if you do make a comment or you want to comment after the event, you can watch the video through and you can comment in the live chat. So when I say please cast your vote for the most competitive rider, you can do it any time. You don't have to do it during the show. You can do it any time that you're watching it afterwards. Okay, that's number 7 home. And here we've got Neil. He's approaching the oh, there we go, there's my alarm. Neil's approaching the kite, but just as he does so, I'm just going to jump back on the bike, and this will be the last time I need to do so, because this will see me through to the finish then. So I don't know how many times I've had to jump on the bike. 5 or 6, have I? Anyway, there we go. That'll do. So let's go back to Neil, who's just caught him going under the kite. 1 kilometre left to cycle, and a good 8th place. He'll be pleased with that because he's managed to leave behind the rest of the small group he was with. Okay. I mean, hats off to every single rider that's taken part in this today. We didn't get the numbers we wanted, but the ones that have shown up and ridden have given us, certainly it's a race that will remember for some time. This is by far the best e-race I've covered. In fact, I think it's the best e-race I've seen for a long time. In terms of, just some individual performances amongst the race dynamics and the team tactics from OTR were just absolutely brilliant. So yeah, just fantastic riding. It's a shame that all the riders that started couldn't finish. Here's Neil. Thank you, Neil, for the wave going over the line. Great ride, sir. Well done. And it's just a shame that every rider. Now then, are these two going to have a sprint? It's just a shame every rider couldn't finish. But for various reasons. I mean, 90 odd kilometers is a long, long time on a bike, and you can have all sorts of problems like cramp. I particularly have suffered from stitch the last couple of races I've done, and makes it very, very difficult. So who's your money on here? Are they going to finish? Oh, they're not really racing. They're just, there we go. Brilliant. Well done, guys. There's 9th and 10th over the line for you. Well done. Good riding. Here's number 11. 1.4 kilometers to go. So, and Jobczynski was up there in the early part of the race. It's fallen back a little bit towards the end, but he was up there. So this has been a good ride too. Well, they've all been good rides. I can't single anybody out. They've all been good rides. I mean, I know who the outstanding rider has been from my point of view, but it's not my view that counts. So don't forget to leave your comment. Let us know who you think should take the prize. There's the kite. Well done, sir. And support the channel. Come on, because I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be covering all of these March Monument series, but also as we move into the summer, I'm going to be covering a lot more events and basically pushing myself on RGT as one of the main commentators. That's my goal. I just want to, I think it's a fantastic platform. I really want to see it get the recognition, get my words out, the recognition it deserves. I think it's a much better platform than Swift, and my thousands of followers on Swift are going to hate me for saying that. But I do. I think it's a much better platform. So let's get it up there. Let's get the word out. And if I can have a good, successful YouTube channel, that's going to help do so. So support me. Support me, support the races, support the organisers like James, who's put this event on. I mean, I think he's done a fantastic job with this series. Shout out to Samir Dwatley, who's done the courses for James. Samir's Magic Roads is his logo. He's done a fantastic job in bringing this to us. And of course, don't forget that the spot prizes that are going to be given out during this race series is by our sponsors, who are torm.cc, Torm Cycle Clothing. It's a very small operation, but they've come on board. They're offering free clothing to some of the riders for taking part. They're looking for the most combative or the best team riders or other criteria. And here's last man on the road. 2.2 kilometers to go. Well done, Mr. Nagy. So please support not just James, Samir and everybody else involved in this venture, but support the sponsors, Torm Cycle Clothing, by popping over to the website. You know, you don't have to buy anything. It'd be nice if you did, but pop over to the website and have a look at their goods. I think the quality is up there with the best I've seen. And the more as individuals we support people like this, you know, this is a very small firm who jumped in, said they'll sponsor the series. The more we support people like that, the more we're going to move forward in terms of promotion and this lot. I mean, I've got an event coming up later on in the year, the White Rose Classic virtual. That's a sportive that's going to have 3 distances, 100 plus miles, 80 plus miles, and 50 miles. So something for everybody. And I'm going to be looking for a main sponsor for that series, so that we can give away prizes for you know, the people that do the best in that series. And it won't be based on who's the strongest or who's the best rider. It to be based on different criteria completely, to give everybody a chance. But I need a sponsor. So, you know, if sponsors can see you supporting events like this, i.e. if you support torm.cc, give them a thumbs up, give them a like, and say, yeah, great job guys for supporting our series, then when I approach people for sponsorship, there's more chance of it happening, rather than, you know, them turning around and saying, well, what do we get out of it? We don't get any exposure. Well, that's why I'm giving them exposure now, because they deserve it. Anybody that puts the hand up, puts the hand in the pockets as well, and says, yeah, okay, we're only a tiny little firm, but we're going to support you, I think deserve full credit for doing that. I mean, the big boys, you're never going to get sponsorship from the likes of the really big champions. So the fact that the smaller players come on board, to me, is just fantastic. Anyway, enough of me rabbiting on about that. Our last rider's coming home, Mr. Nagy, and finishing off what for me has been a stunning event. Finished well before I expected as well. I called it at 3:10. We're going to come in at 3:05. So thank you everybody for joining us. If you're still here, you're still watching, don't forget the thumbs up, the like, subscribe, and we'll be back again doing it all tomorrow for the sportive. I hope you've enjoyed the coverage. Hope you've enjoyed me waffling on for more than 3 hours. And I think we've had a good insight into what e-racing is all about. This has been a really, really good, well put on event. I wish we'd had more riders, but we've had enough and it's been a good event. So thank you everybody for watching. I'm going to close down the stream as soon as Mr. Nagy comes over the line. In fact, no, I'm not. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Before I finish the stream, I'm just going to switch view on the stream. There I am at the end. I'm going to switch view and I'm going to show you just very briefly the website of our main sponsors. So here we go. Let me just interact with it. Now this is the website of our main sponsors, Torm Cycle Clothing. Please consider nipping to the website, visiting them, and have a look at this excellent range of cycle clothing that they do. And on that note, I'm going to say good night and thank you. See you all tomorrow. And there's James just thanking me there. But I'm going to end the stream here. And as I say, we'll see you all tomorrow afternoon for the third of the sportives.